Hello, and welcome back to Reverence for Reverie. I'm Marrissa, your host. Today's episode is one that I hadn't originally planned, but after receiving some really valuable feedback, I realized it was essential. So I'm calling it episode 1.5. It was brought to my attention that when I reference truth, it might need some more elaboration. That insight was so important because it made me realize that while my understanding of truth feels very clear to me, I hadn't fully articulated it for you, my listeners. I deeply appreciate these kinds of questions and feedback because they invite me to go deeper, to clarify, and to open up new ways of exploring the ideas that I hold closely. So, in this episode, I want to take some time to explore what I mean when I talk about truth. This is something that sits at the very foundation of this podcast. The idea that truth is not singular, nor is it rigid. To me, truth has layers. There are universal truths, those fundamental realities that exist whether we acknowledge them or not. Truths that stretch across time, space, and human experience. Then there are personal truths that are shaped by our individual perspectives, experiences, and beliefs. These are truths that may feel undeniable to us, but might look entirely different to someone else. And most importantly, I believe that multiple truths can and do exist at the same time, without one needing to erase, invalidate, or dominate the other. In this episode, we'll explore the many dimensions of truth, from the universal to the personal, from the psychological to the somatic, from the philosophical to the spiritual. We'll discuss what it means to hold multiple realities at once, why this can be both freeing and simultaneously unsettling, and why ultimately truth is something far more fluid than we might think. So let's explore this together. There are some truths that feel universal, truths that exist beyond individual experience. These truths are not dependent on belief. They are simply part of the fabric of reality. One of these is the truth that we are all more connected than we realize. This is something that quantum physics speaks to through the concept of quantum entanglement, where two particles who have come into contact with each other at some point, no matter how far apart they go, remain inexplicably linked. It's something that spiritual traditions have always known, speaking of an invisible web that ties us together, whether we are aware of it or not. This is often referred to as oneness. On a human level, we feel this truth in the way emotions shift in a room, in the way a single moment can ripple outward in unseen ways. Another universal truth is that everything is in a constant state of change. Whether we look at the cycles of the seasons, the way our bodies regenerate cells, or the shifts in consciousness that unfold over the course of a lifetime, change is the only true constant. And then there's the truth that there is always more beyond what we can perceive. Whether through the limitations of our five senses, the ever-expanding frontiers of scientific discovery, or the unseen dimensions of experience that mystics and seekers have spoken of for centuries, we know that we are never seeing the full picture. But while these truths may be universal, our experience of them is always deeply personal. No two people will grasp these realities in the same way, nor should they. Truth, while it is shared, is also uniquely felt. Alongside these vast, overarching truths exist the ones that shape us on a much more intimate level. Our personal truths. These are the truths that arise from our own experiences, our values, our perceptions, and the way we have come to make sense of the world. What I see as sacred, another might see as ordinary. What feels undeniably true in my life may not hold any resonance for someone else. And that, to me, is not a flaw. It's exactly as it should be. For some, solitude is the path to truth. For others, truth emerges in the energy of dialogue, in connection, in community. One person may find truth in structured religion, another in the wilderness, another in deep contemplation. None of these truths negate the others. They simply reflect the infinite ways we come to know ourselves and the world around us. Carl Jung spoke of the process of individuation, the journey of integrating our unconscious with our conscious self, of carving out a personal sense of truth that is uniquely ours. He believed that much of human suffering comes from trying to live by truths that are not our own, truths imposed by society, family, or culture that do not align with the deeper calling of the soul. I really resonate with this, and I've experienced its truth over and over in my practice. In fact, I'll be elaborating on this in our next episode about decolonizing our minds. To embrace personal truth means to listen, to unlearn, and to allow ourselves to be transformed. It is not about imposing our truth onto others, but about embodying it in a way that is authentic to us. As we consider how we construct our sense of truth, it's impossible to overlook one of our most powerful tools, language. The very words we use don't just reflect reality, they actively create our perception of it. Calling something a failure frames it with finality, while labeling the same event a lesson suggests growth and possibility. In this way, language acts like a lens, coloring how we interpret each experience and ultimately how we define what's true. Imagine standing at a crossroads after a difficult breakup. You tell yourself, "I've failed. This is the end of something precious." The words fall heavy, as though each syllable confirms a sense of loss beyond repair. Now, picture an alternative story. This chapter has closed and a new one is beginning. Suddenly, the same event sparks a different emotional current, one colored by openness rather than defeat. That is not to say that it removes the pain associated with the loss, but simply adjusts the lens with which we look through as we move through that loss. You see, language acts like a sculptor, carving the contours of reality itself. It doesn't merely describe our experiences, it molds them. A job loss can be called a catastrophe, or a chance to reinvent oneself. The bedrock situation still remains the same. There are bills to pay, resumes to send, but the words chosen create an undercurrent of despair or possibility. Whenever we talk about truth, we cannot ignore the linguistics that frame it. If language is the lens through which we understand the world, then every word we choose shapes what we believe to be true. Sometimes your body knows the truth before your mind can catch up. You walk into a room and your shoulders tense, your breath shortens, yet consciously you see no danger. Still, there's something that feels off. Our bodies speak in a language of signals: tightness in the chest, butterflies in the stomach, a lump in the throat. These sensations often reveal truths our intellect might explain away or simply miss. I'll dive further into the link between the psyche and the soma in future episodes, so be sure to keep an eye out for those if this thought is interesting to you. Trauma experts understand that unresolved events live not just in our memories, but in our muscles, nerves, and fascia. It's why a sudden noise can trigger a full body reaction long after the actual threat has passed. By tuning in, placing a gentle hand on the place of tension, slowing our breath, and listening, we can honor the body's intelligence. We validate that truth lies not only in facts or logical analysis, but in the subtle cues our body provides every single day. All of that said, there is certainly a challenge that we all face in embracing new truths. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once wrote about the dizziness of freedom. the unsettling feeling that arises when we step outside the familiar and into the unknown. When we realize that truth is not fixed, but fluid, it can be both exhilarating and terrifying. Wilfred Bion, a psychoanalyst, explored and expanded on this idea from another angle. He believed that unconsciously, many of us, and likely all of us at certain points, resist learning. In fact, that we actually have a hatred of it. Not because we don't want to grow, but because learning requires us to sit in uncertainty. He called this resistance an attack on linking, the mind's way of shutting down new insights before they have a chance to change us. Bion suggested that learning, especially about oneself and one's inner world, can be painful and confrontational. When new insights or links threaten to expose difficult emotions, such as shame, envy, grief, or overwhelming anxiety, part of the psyche may actively sabotage the integration of this knowledge to avoid that emotional pain. Attacking links can, paradoxically, bring short-term relief. If we destroy the capacity to link, we also destroy the capacity to feel certain painful truths about ourselves or the world. In the long run, however, this leaves a person more fragmented and less able to function adaptively. This is why truth can be so difficult. It requires us to remain open to not knowing, to resist the urge to cling to certainty, and to trust that we can, in fact, hold paradox without falling apart. In the context of this discussion, I also think it's important to consider how different cultures hold different perspectives on truth. In many indigenous traditions, truth is not something separate from the community or from nature. It is inherently relational. In Native American traditions, for example, wisdom is often passed down through oral storytelling, where truth is revealed through experience, metaphor, and connection, rather than rigid facts. This is a perspective I deeply resonate with, and as we go along, you'll find that metaphor is one of my favorite ways to deliver some of the concepts that I present. Eastern philosophies also take a different approach to truth. In Zen Buddhism, for example, truth is often expressed through paradox. One famous koan asks, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? I'm sure you're familiar with that one. A koan is used to challenge a practitioner's usual ways of thinking. The purpose of working with these isn't to arrive at a rational answer, but to disrupt habitual thought patterns, encourage deeper self-inquiry, and ultimately lead to greater insight or awakening. These thought-provoking questions are meant to be lived with, not merely solved, allowing the individual to experience a shift in perception that cannot be reached through analysis or reason alone. The point is not to answer the question, but to sit with it, to recognize that truth is not always something that we can grasp intellectually. Truth, in these traditions, is not about certainty. It is about presence. Truth is not static. It is alive. It shifts. It deepens. It unfolds in layers. What feels true today may expand tomorrow. Not because the truth itself has changed, but because we have. When we stop seeing truth as something to be owned or proven, we create space for the quiet wonder of the unknown, for the beauty of not having all the answers. So I invite you to sit with this. What if truth was not something to chase, but something to dance with? Truth can feel absolute, a firm line drawn in the sand, unyielding in its finality. And yet, there's a part of us, maybe it's the daydreamer or the creative spirit, that senses truth might be more fluid than we imagine. Enter reverie, that spacious state of mind that I continue to reference, where what we think we know meets the imagination's untamed possibilities. In this state, truths can dance rather than stand still. They can morph expand, or merge with new insights. This podcast is about creating a container for wonder and exploration. So often, we're treating truth like a finish line we must race toward. But what if truth is less about arriving somewhere and more about experiencing the journey along the way? With a reverie-infused perspective, truth becomes something we can swim in, play with, a moment-to-moment encounter that holds unexpected revelations. When we let the reverie gently soften our grip on the rigid edges of right and wrong, we open ourselves to a reality that might be more complex, more paradoxical, yet also more alive. As we close, I invite you to reflect on your own relationship to truth. Where have you been certain? And where have you been willing to be surprised? What truths have shaped you? And which ones are you outgrowing? And how would it feel to hold truth gently, allowing curiosity, imagination, and reverie to reshape the statement, I know, into something dynamic and ever unfolding? If you found this episode meaningful, don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening so you don't miss what's next. Please share it with a friend, and if you're willing, please feel free to leave a review. It helps us grow this community and its impact. You can connect with us on Instagram at reverie_the collective, or you can email us at reveriecollectiveteam@gmail.com. Until next time, and with the deepest gratitude, stay curious, stay open, and let the reverie lead you.